How did the climate of your ancestors affect your metabolism? So there's DNA inside of the nucleus, inside of every cell inside of our body. And most of the cells in our body contain at least one mitochondria, which also has its own DNA. The DNA in the nucleus codes for things like our hair color and our skin color, whereas the DNA in the mitochondria has instructions for the production of energy. And unlike the DNA inside of your nucleus, all of your mitochondrial DNA is passed down specifically from your mother, who got it from her mother, who got it from her mother. And because your mitochondrial genetics are only your mother's genetics and not a mix of both your father's and mother's genetics, the mitochondrial genetics that you have are very similar to your mother's and your mother's mother, and so on. And when glucose, fatty acids, and even amino acids are broken down, they can enter the mitochondria. And inside, they can produce two different things. The first is energy in the form of ATP, and the second is heat. And the more of the energy that enters into our mitochondria that becomes heat, the more fat, glucose, and amino acids we will need to break down in order to get enough energy. Which means the more heat your mitochondria are emitting, the higher your metabolism. The more heat your mitochondria produce, the greater your internal body temperature. And if you lived in a cold climate, this would be beneficial. But if you lived in a warm climate, this might actually be a negative characteristic. So throughout evolution, the mitochondria of those who lived in warm climates had alteration in their mitochondrial DNA to favor the production of energy rather than the production of heat, meaning they required less food to create the same amount of energy. In contrast, those who lived in a colder climate developed the mitochondrial DNA that favored the production of heat rather than the production of energy, meaning they required more food to produce the same energy. And now these haplogroups have crazy names. But this study demonstrated that African haplogroups seem to have a lower resting metabolic rate than European haplogroups. Therefore, if you had African ancestors, because they lived in a warm climate, you likely have a lower resting metabolic rate, and may also have a reduced cold tolerance because your mitochondria are not producing as much heat. And on the other side, those from European haplogroups had an increased resting metabolic rate and will likely be able to produce more internal body heat. So through a very long and complex series of mechanisms, the climate that your ancestors lived in are still affecting your metabolism today. And if your mother or grandmother ever tells you that you've been gaining or losing weight, let her know that it might actually be her fault and send her this video.